So yeah, on here in your email, I believe what it was.
Yeah.
First question is, can you change evaluation to reflect correct soil type? I've sand, not clay. Doesn't seem right. There was a deadline last year, so you were not you did not file an exception.
Because
is
I
what
didn't know. I sat down with the
deadline.
guys. They looked at my property,
Yeah.
and I called and said, "Oh yeah, my
Yep.
neighbor said we're sand." And then when I asked Jay, he said it was no, you're because I seen D and A, and I didn't
Mhm.
realize there was letters between that too. And so I pulled up the map and everything, and everybody around me is listed as A, and I'm D, and it don't take much to see that I'm sand. It's everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I understand.
And then I know that there was a final hearing, but there was a postponed to a final hearing, so there's
Yeah.
two final hearings,
Yeah,
but the
that
only one that
started.
counted for the the update thing was for the first one. So they said if I come down and sit down, maybe I could get a final hearing, or not a final hearing, but a
Yeah, like a hearing.
correction.
Yep, and so that was it too. Like I was just finishing up working on another gentleman that's in the Swan Creek watershed as well too. In regards to he requested, and all I can do is sit here and let you know about what's been told and directed to me regarding this. So it's kind of the same thing as what Jay's going to go through. But if you still would actually like to have a pre-hearing before the final hearing with the county engineer. And I don't know if he's going to include the commissioners or not, but you could still do that as well too. And that would be where you're finally talking to him, like, hey, is he going to be okay with giving this change that you see in the A or the D? Because what Jay does have down in here, and this came from the county engineer again, we basically look for him in the direction of the way the code
Are you
reads.
talking about Mike when you said
Mike
that?
Panuski.
Okay.
Yeah, Mike Panuski,
So
county
he
engineer.
makes all the final decisions.
Yeah. This is his office. We work for him.
Gotcha.
So, and in here, this is exactly what Jay puts down in there. It's per the code. The amount in the maintenance base approved by the commissioners at the final hearing back in March is the one that will be used to calculate assessments for the 25 taxes that actually get billed out in 26. So the approval of the way it was calculated for this current year back at March is what would then be put on to the assessment rolls for 26. But then he says in here, section 6137.11, parentheses B, allows the county engineer to recommend changes to the maintenance base each year. So the next opportunity to revisit the amount and for us to make a recommendation would be in 2026 for the 2027 assessments.
Okay.
Based on your request, we will certainly keep your request on file for the next year. If the county engineer recommends a change to be made, you will be notified of the proposed change. So what he is saying is that at least the way that he had been told by Mike Panuski is that everything's kind of been made up for the 25 thing, so to be taxed on 26, but in 26 we could review and then get that correction made of all the soil type, so that in 27 you would be taxed on that correct soil type classification. But again, since it is still a year where you feel that you're wrong, if you want to have that final hearing or like a pre-hearing before the final hearing with Mike Panuski, that's I've created like a directory list of any resident who wishes to, I can only tell you what I've been told to do, but
Right.
to provide in front of him and say, hey, this is my case. I didn't get the exception in, but this I feel is wrong, and have that conversation with him.
No, it's not just that I feel it. You guys take the information from the USDA soil site,
Yeah.
right? And that lists me as sand too. So if
Yeah.
I'm wrong, then they're wrong. And
Yeah, no, exactly. So
Okay.
yeah, we use the references that are incorporated in there for the USDA and the NRCS soil survey map
Yeah.
in there. So again, yeah, with all that in consideration, that's why, like I say, this is what Jay has said in there.
So is there a case number that I can reference? When do they? I'm just relying on you guys to contact me within
Yeah.
the next 18 months or something or whatever.
Well, it'd
year.
be less than that.
Okay.
It'd be for this definitely we would get that, making sure after this final hearing coming up. But if you do want to talk directly to him before this final hearing, that's what I was looking to do, is going through those lists. There's about I don't have it exactly, but I believe there's 5 other people that have requested this for Swan Creek that I don't want to wait till the final hearing. I want to come in and talk to him before then.
Yeah.
So
I'd rather not be billed for more than I have to be
yeah,
if it
no,
passes.
Yep, definitely.
Okay.
And so then, and then he just mentions you're welcome to attend the final hearing July 15th at 2 p.m. to present your case to the commissioners. But again, that's where I'm saying you can do this beforehand, to just come here instead of having to go to the final hearing. Second question is a little longer, hoping you can provide links or something as I've been told.
One back to the maybe it's the first one or it could be the second one too. So the different soil types, like if I want to plug and chug my own numbers, certainly there's got to be some sort of formula. So I know that I don't think I have my postcard, but the maintenance base fee, and then there's percentages based off of that for the breakdown to calculate this, right?
Yeah.
So how do I figure out what the percentages are for what? Like, what's the cost of sand versus the cost of clay?
Yeah, no, I got you. So let me see where it says right in here where it is. Hydraulic soil group is D, and then where does the C? So the C right here, that C ratio is what goes into a mixture of the land use as well as the soil classification. And so like I can print you out one of the ones that we use as a reference. Now, I don't know exactly how the whole breakdown went through, but I do have it, because it doesn't look like he has it on there, but one that is used by like Medina County, and it got put into a reference for the C, or the soil type classification with land use. I'm looking up right now for you.
Because I have like land use was based on the zoning.
Yeah,
There's
land use
a
zoning,
one-
so residential generally is it.
Okay. But I'm just talking about the soil type now.
Yeah, but
right?
that goes into it. You'll see when I print this out.
Okay.
When I find this, it incorporates both into there.
Ultimately, what I want to do is calculate my own, and then sit down with my neighbor and help her calculate hers too.
Yep. Yeah, he didn't mention that. I'm just trying to find.
I did honestly go on the website.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I was on Facebook a lot, but not getting answers. Just told I'm wrong and to call your office and go to the website. So I tried, but I just came up with more questions.
No, I understand. We, at least in the stormwater department, we do not run or associate with our social media, so.
Right. Yeah, I get
Yeah.
it.
But no,
It's a
yeah, to
shouting
come in
match.
here and person to person is
Okay.
definitely the way that it is. I'm just trying to give a good example. Let me go get this printout.
You have this, right, Jim?
Yeah, I got it. So this is the coefficients that we would use for like the previous petitions that we did. Now, this is to say this was a lot smaller of watersheds, so if there were changes, that again is like when Jay and another GIS technician were like working on these. But this is the kind of general guideline. So as you see here, you get the land use classification, but then in the residential, it'll change too, so where actually the more acreage that you actually get a benefit. Because it's to say like, you know, a subdivision home, when they're in these tiny lots, but the home is as big as your home is, well, they're gonna run off more, so the C is gonna be a larger value. So you'll see here where like, you know, say a 1/4 acre subdivision lot for, you know, if we went to D soil, this is all A, it's kind of offline, but A is here, B, C, and D. So a 1/4 acre lot at 0.64, that's a higher number, so that means that more water's running off versus when you get to, because you're on more than 2 acres, right? 5
Yeah.
acres. So everything 2 acres and above just gets lumped into the 2 acres, and it's assumed plus. So more runs off from a 1/4 acre lot, so a 0.64 coefficient, versus the 2 acre that's set at 0.5.
Okay.
Um,
So this is not the same formula, or it is? So do I say?
well, in there, so like,
because I've got 5 acres and it just goes up to 2, do I take this times my MB to figure out the,
This is a part of the equation, so there's gonna be
Okay.
the 5 factors in the equation.
right,
So let me grab a pen and.
acreage, land use, soil classification, usage
Yep.
factor, and remote factor. And I've got all the data for my property that I copied off of here.
Yep, yeah, and so this is pulling from here.
So if you wanna walk me through.
Yep, so right here, the main equation is gonna be, and I'm gonna write upside down, so, I don't know how good it'll be. That was supposed to be an A, but that was terrible. So the C that you have here for your property is a 0.6667. So we'll just say 0.67
And C is the land use, right?
is the sand or the soil classification and the land use, yes. So we've got a 0.67 there for C, which is this.
Yeah.
Right here, the C value. So that is your soil classification, which here was listed under D as you feel that it's incorrect, and by the soils maps to get corrected at a residential. So in here, here's your D
Mhm.
that's right down here, and then at 2 acres plus, because your acreage is 4.9, it's around in this ballpark. Now again, when they made the calculations and changes on stuff, I don't know why there's a discrepancy. That I'd have to that either be through Jay, Bob, or Mike Panuski himself. They were the determinants on these changes.
Okay.
A is a standard across the board. So if we went to
I.
any,
Aye.
I, sorry.
Okay.
I is a standard across the board. That's a 2. What that is it's the IDF curve for Lucas County and anywhere throughout there. It's from like the 1940s collection, but what's the average intensity of rainfall for this specific area? So Lucas County, the standard is 2.0 inches per hour. So this 2 for I is going to be the same on everybody's parcel.
Okay.
So even your neighbors, even people that are included in this watershed in Toledo, everybody gets a standard 2.0 for I. So that's a standard across the board. So we have 2 here, which shoot, I gotta.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not as
I don't-
I'm not as good as
I can't write upside down.
Dr. K retired. He could do it in his sleep. And then we're taking your
Acreage.
at 4.9, and assuming, I don't know if it has acreage legal is 5. So 4.9 legally on your acreage, you have 5 acres. This is a little bit less, so it's actually benefit. You legally own this, right? But your acreage is a little bit less than what you're legal, and so that helps you out. You want to always just think of it this
What's
way.
that 0.1 difference?
0.1 difference. GIS. So the difference in that is the way that it's drawn on the GIS mapping, because all of the, and this is where errors and calculations and stuff can come in. All of the information for the parcels is taken off of our GIS. Have you been to our GIS on the website?
I believe I clicked on
Probably.
it.
So if you went, did you do like the Find My Parcel map?
I did this.
Yeah. Okay. So then if
Yeah.
you've been here, you've been on our GIS. It's just
But
a
I
big
just didn't
map.
understand it.
Yeah, I know, and it's all confusing. No, this is, you legally still own your property of exactly 5 acres. It's a little bit less in there because when it gets clipped, meaning when Bob would take all of this GIS information and pull it in, it takes all these lines that are drawn above an aerial map. So sometimes there could be a plus or minus difference on there.
So it's not like an easement or road or
No.
anything, it's just.
We ended up for residential just using that highlighted value. So
Oh, okay.
larger acres because there was setting up
This
too
is
many variables.
Kyle Warner, Stormwater
Thank you.
Engineer too. So yeah, right here, the
That's where you're getting that number.
okay, yeah. So this was the use half acre on all residential parcels across the board.
So it's not even going with up to 2 then, it's just saying half acre.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's
all of
for
these.
creating just the C value.
Yeah, so the
Okay.
C value. So this does have, and again, you can have both sets of these copies, but I'll still run through.
Okay.
So on here, 4.9, you still legally own that. The 4.9, it's the GIS error, but that actually is a slight benefit for you. Now, it's not to say it's going to correct this issue of the D, but a 4.9, we want lower numbers. So you have the 4.9 in here. And then so when you get this, you multiply this out, this becomes what's known as your Q in the drainage engineering sense. So, and you want to, if you want to do the math too, but I could do it out with
Yeah.
you. So 0.67, which was 667 times 2
Times 4.9.
times 4.9 4.9 equals, so we get 6.566. I'll write that real quick here, 566. Then the other two factors is what Jay goes on in here to say. I think it's on the back sheet, and I meant to do this on a single page. I don't know why it came
It's
out.
okay.
Yeah, so he goes into detail here, usage factor, and then remoteness or remote factor.
Yep.
And then so on here, this becomes your Q, and then we add in the two factors. So these are the final two things. We've got, of the 5 factors, we've got the acreage, the intensity, the runoff coefficient, which is land use plus soil type, and then as well as your usage and remote factor, which will then multiply into this. So in here, when we look at it, these are the two things. Usage is the usage factor, which we'll go into again, and then remote, which I'll get into again too with what Jay put in, 0.5 and 0.95, and then we just multiply these two together to get a combined factor.
Okay.
So let's
You multiply, not add.
yeah, multiply. Yeah, because this is all gonna be. You could either leave these alone and then just multiply all three together. What we did is we just did a combined factor, so we multiply these two, and then this gets multiplied into your Q. So when we come into here to clear this out, I'll take the usage of 0.45 and then multiply it by the remote factor of 0.95, and that gets us 0.4275.
Okay. And is that added to or multiplied to the
This will
6?
now be multiplied into your Q of 6566. 4.4275. So then I'll take the 0.4275
Mhm.
and then multiply it into your Q that was the multiplication of all three of these. So now 6.566, and that's where it comes with the 2.8069. So your final Q, as we call it, I believe in there, is at 2.8069. And so if we look in here, that's what it should be, or weighted Q, 2.
So Lucas County parcels had a,
Weighted Q. Area Q.
what's her parcel ID, man?
Her parcel ID, 521-1392.
So somewhere in between there is where you kind of throw a little both.
Yeah, so the weighted Q dropped even lower than what it was because when we multiply these two
There's
together.
a factor that was applied when we still had Wood County and Fulton County in there.
Oh, so that's what.
Yeah, so because there was originally an error in how everything was processed, then we looked at the watersheds versus the usage and applied a factor for Lucas County, and that factor value, and this is where your Q's coming off lower, apply a factor of 0.728 to the Q, to your calculated Q that you got.
Factor of what?
0.728. 7282 if you want to be exact.
Yeah, so that puts it around in there in 7.2.
So that weighted Q for that parcel should be 2.035.
Which is what it's listed as.
Yeah.
And then is that multiplied by the MB or something then to find out?
No, so
Oh.
the maintenance base is where this starts in is this number that we get. So this 2.3, all of the Q's of every single parcel is basically the sum of what we valued or evaluated the cost of the total Swan Creek watershed at, which was at 3.5 million or 350 million.
Yeah,
350 million. So that's where it gets confusing when people are just seeing, this is a 2 number. Well, how do you get to the dollar amounts of this? So when we take this Q that's set in there and then divide that into the sum Q, so every single parcel that's in there, so your 2.035 would be divided into the total sum Q of the entire Swan Creek watershed parcels.
350 million? Or no?
The percentage that comes from there, which I don't know what the sum. Are you able to look that up? What the sum Q is?
Yeah.
I believe it would have. it'll have the percentage here. Yeah, percent of total. So when you look here at weighted Q, your 2.03, and then we divide that into the total, it comes down to your percentage of the total Q in the watershed, which is 0.00, all these.
And the total weighted cube for the entire watershed is 22,967.802.
So yeah, it comes out to be that. So all of the sum Qs, your parcel Q divided into that, 0.008, and it just stops it at 89. But we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 in there. So then we take that, your percentage, then multiply that into the 350 million, and that would be your total maintenance base, that large number at the bottom. So when we do 0.000089 times 350 million, big numbers here, comes down to where it shows above. Hold on, let me make sure I didn't mess up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9 times 350 million. Yeah, it's still. Was there like another factor put into that, Kyle? It's her maintenance base is showing even lower than what I'm running on the calc here.
So when you get that percentage of the total,
Mm-hmm.
that was multiplied by the original total for the watershed before the commissioners from Fulton and Henry pulled out,
Okay.
which would have been the 350 million.
Oh, so it's less than 350 million because we didn't include their parcel. So it's slightly less. What was it, like 300 million then?
Yeah, so for, let me pull up that.
It's less than 300 million. I think 275 million. Just a little over. It's around there.
And that's this number times.
The total cost of the watershed. But since there was a change at the first final hearing that went through, Henry and Fulton County Commissioners said that their residents, they felt were not going to get any benefits, so they pulled out. So that's why there was some change in the numbers. So when they fell out and the ditches that were to be cleaned, the total amount of Swan Creek lessened. We evaluated at 350 million with them included. When they dropped out, that got reduced to somewhere around, actually it's below 275 million, because at 275 million on your percent of total at the 0.00089, well, I mean, again too, we were running 00, I think it was 86 or 886 you were, times 275 million. Let's try that. It's still a little bit above. So the total of it's got to be a little less than 275 million. But that's where your maintenance base comes from. So it's basically the total maintenance base is what is your piece of the pie of the whole watershed. So of a dollar cost. So spreading that 275 million-ish dollars around for total maintenance base, that's where yours came out to be $23,456.75. Now that's your total maintenance base. That's not what you would be assessed a year. That's just saying if the watershed went completely under and had to be rebuilt, that's the benefit that you would realize of it having to be built out at this cost for the benefit. But then on a per year basis, we went at, I believe it was 1%, right, Kyle?
Yes.
1%. So that's where I believe what yours shows at, $234.57, which is basically just 1% of your total maintenance base is what's projected as your yearly assessment for 2026.
Okay, but so so this will or will not match my postcard since Fulton and Henry County dropped off and it went from 350 to 265 million.
So yours
What did I get
wasn't
crossed?
modified. Your maintenance base remains the same when theirs pulled out. What happens is We're now not including any of those maintenance spaces from the other counties. So the total maintenance space for the entire project, essentially the entire project, if you would call it that way, has been reduced from 350 million down to
65-ish.
Yeah,
Somewhere
the
around there.
total that we have now is 267 million.
Okay.
And change. if you wanna call it
So yeah, we skipped over let me see this, going through those two factors with the combined. So here they are here, the usage factor, where Jay writes in about, you know, the determination on how we did the usage factor. This is the map for usage. So usage factor values he provided. And again, you can have all this stuff to read over and go into more detail of what he reads into there, because this is from Jay along with the remoteness, and there will be a map there. But what we did on the usage is all the water drains in a watershed, you know, starting along in here in Swan Creek and then draining this way. So a factor of usage is when your property drains into Swan Creek at whatever portion it comes into, what stem of it does it use? So somebody in Toledo uses less of it, so their usage factor is going to be less. They're going to get charged less on using only this portion of Swan Creek until it gets out into Maumee River.
But Toledo's not even part of this, though.
Toledo is.
They're getting charged too?
Yeah, Toledo is.
Okay.
So now the city of Toledo has assumed it for the residents, but the city of Toledo is going to have to raise, you know, some other tax that they collect. But yeah, so everybody in Toledo, all parcels will be assessed in Toledo as well too. It's just that it'll come through a different mechanism. And as well,
do you guys do the work throughout Toledo then too? Because I think the engineers didn't do the Toledo stuff.
no, yeah, they will do it, and that's where
Okay.
Toledo has proposed that they will utilize their forces to go out and do work in kind of like a sweat equity, so that they'll go and do work in their community, and if it meets the project specs and they're working on those ditches that are in the Swan Creek petition, then they're basically like working off in a sweat equity of like, they'll go out there, they'll clean the ditches, and depending on how much cost that is per year, if they're under all of the city of Toledo's right of way, because for roads like us in the county, we're going to charge ourselves too. So like any county road gets an assessment value too, because those get rated at right of way calculations. So I mean, we're even sending over you know, and here's RC values for all of these that were done. So like township, county roads, even Ohio Department of Transportation, all get ran through because the roads are benefiting from this as well too. So the jurisdictions pay into it as well too. So what, between their roads that benefit as well as the residents, whatever that dollar amount is, you know, say it's like $300,000. Excuse me, they propose to do up to $300,000 of work per year in their ditches.
Okay.
And that was with them assuming it to the county commissioner saying, hey, we'll do the work, you know, up to that amount.
Do they file the exemption fees for doing their own stuff, or is that just a totally different?
It's a different thing under the code for
Okay.
what municipals, and that's where there was a lot of concerns brought up by like the townships, because some of the townships wanted to be able to do it. The way that the code reads, from what Mike Panuski said, is that incorporated jurisdictions, so a city or a village can assume for their residents, but townships cannot. So like the city of Toledo chose to do it. The city for 10 Mile, the city of Sylvania chose to do it, but like here in Swan Creek, Waterville did not assume. They just said, you know, hey, the residents can pay for themselves for the portion of their property that they have. So it was up to, you know, the city councils to be able to choose whether they wanted to assume or not. And then they had to let Mike Panuski know by I think it was before the final hearing, if they were going to assume or not, because that all had to get laid out in stone. But so the usage factors here So you benefit more the further out from the watershed or from where the point of release is into the Maumee River, because you're using more of Swan Creek's whole stem. So for everybody here in the western portion of the county, all their water is going to be draining in, and where this is all shaded out is the different points at where Swan Creek, the drainage comes into. So like in this green zone, which I believe you are in, right? Because your usage
Pretty
factor.
close, yeah.
Your usage factor at
0.45.
0.45. Yeah, so you're somewhere in this zone, saying that your drainage as it comes off the land goes into a portion of Swan Creek along in this area, I think is where it is, but just the same as all they come down. So where you come in, you're receiving the most benefit of usage because you're using the entirety stem of it going all the way down. Whereas, I mean, up in here, it's a very low 0.25 because people up here in, I guess that would be like maybe Maumee going into Toledo, they're only just coming into Swan Creek here and using this. They're not utilizing all this portion of Swan Creek. But usually what ended up happening is then when you get to the remoteness factor, they'll actually get inverse of that, because then here's the remoteness factor. And then so remoteness is how far out away from the actual channel it is. So whereas the usage factor, because of the way the water drains,
It's just a
left to
distance
right.
to the outlet.
Yeah. Whereas the remoteness is north and south in this case, because here's the main stem of Swan, it appears, and then so as you move south or north, you're experiencing less benefit versus those that are right on it, because if a flood was to happen, it's going to happen in the primary stem. So anybody who lives along in this area at the 1.0 factor rate is going to need more work, or else they're going to experience a flood first. And as you move further out away from there, you become less of a chance of flooding out from Swan Creek due to the remoteness. You're further away from the direct proximity of the project.
Okay. So like my property, I have a drainage ditch. I have a grate on the front of the side of my driveway,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not part of the ditch work,
Correct.
right? So there will be no cleaning of my drainage pipe, correct, under this petition?
Yeah, so you're saying like out towards the road, there's a
Yeah, but I just don't understand how the property, because I can sit on my porch and see that my property slopes uphill towards the road. So I know
Mhm.
I'm not draining into that ditch. I have a pond and a big berm, just, coming off that ditch.
Mhm.
So it would be like literally impossible for water to go up and over. So it's going to the back of my property where I have, standing water, and I have a well and stuff like that. So I just, I mean, I'm not an engineer. I just don't understand how I benefit from this,
yeah.
because I don't see my water going that route.
Yeah.
And how does it get into the water table and fill my pond and all that stuff?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
again, that's looking at this as like a surface water thing. One thing that I can do, I'll print out for you too, just so that you can have, and with this meeting with Mike Panuski, one good thing is give me your address one more time, and what
Yeah.
I'll do is I'll print out,
Because I saw
We have it on our-
elevation.
so that's what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna print out the elevations that are on your property.
If I'm low, I'm probably not draining into something.
But that way it'll give you like a reference, and you can bring this in as
Yeah.
evidence or support too as well.
Okay.
Give me one. What is your address?
12955 Archibald White House, and that's White House, and it's Providence Township.
Okay, yeah, you're on the south side of the road.
That's correct.
Yep. All right, I got you here. Yeah, let me.
And that's
Try.
where when I pulled up the map, my neighbors D and the 10 acres behind me is paying half as much, and I was like, how does that work?
Yep. Let me see if I can.
And I get the need for some sort of a clear, simplistic thing, because you can't measure every molehill on people's property. I just
Yeah,
trying to
there
understand
are
how.
some assumptions that come with it, but then again, it's making sure like those assumptions are in the sphere of like what is real and realistic. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm trying to. I'm gonna print out the GIS with like contours for your property. I'm just trying to get it at a good scale to get, I guess, the whole thing.
tried to download some soil maps and whatnot, but the files were too big. I don't know what.
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be here too. It's trying to get it. Let me click it probably right back here. That might work. I'm trying to click this now. Let's see if this will work.
I appreciate these maps so that I hadn't seen those before, so that gives me a visual on that
Yeah, no problem.
usage factor and remoteness.
Yeah, like Jay was working on getting that back to you, but then if you.
I know, I was a little demanding. He said Thursday and then Friday and.
Well, I know, but he did say you were gonna come out last Wednesday too.
Yeah.
Impromptu thing come up. How these snapshots anymore.
Is Toledo doing that, covering their residents in perpetuity, or just for 6 years like White House?
So what I've been told is it's in perpetuity, so
Okay.
that they would find that, and I believe that was kind of the sticking point for some of them, that if a city chose to assume that it ran with it the entirety in perpetuity as well too. So that there was none of this like back and forth. It's
Yeah.
hey, if you assume it, then you're assuming it for good.
I hate to work on the end because I just seen that report that Swan
Oh.
Creek was getting E. coli from Arlington, but you guys said that you guys don't have any stuff to do with that, so I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that would be them, and
You think they're
I mean, I
gonna
would
clean the
fig-
ditch and they can't even fix their sewers? I mean, are they gonna be dumping the sewers into Swan Creek? Is that what we're doing here?
yeah.
Pulling an old mommy? No.
And that's the thing that needs to be worked out with the
Yeah.
city and Ohio EPA for those. combined
Yeah,
sewers.
I know that's not your ball game. It's probably for the best.
I mean, yeah, definitely. Hey, if they want to do it, but that means, yeah, they're doing it, not
Yeah.
us.
Okay, what's your address?
You're digging out logs, but not the proper logs.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd much rather be doing log jams than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything. I just saw the news report come through.
That's all I saw too.
Yeah.
And now, are you located within the city of Maumee, or is this
There we go. We got it to work. So I have your address highlighted here on the blue shade.
Okay.
And then so it is still kind of hard to tell. But right here we have a 671 elevation that runs along there. And then it'll only do, like for this it picked up 671. But if we run over to here, this purple's a 670.
Mm-hmm.
Deerfield?
So it appears that like 71, as you're heading more
And
in,
Deer
it's gonna
Creek,
go up by,
okay.
these are 1 foot intervals I'll put down.
Are all the same colored lines, the same elevation or not?
So purples are gonna be every 5 foot. So
Okay.
like a 670, if there was here's a 665. So every 5, the purple kind of delineates it. So like you can see here that the
Okay,
ground is
and what's
rising as we go this way. So here we have a 671, even 673. So it appears that like the land is, if you imagine it, it's sloped like this by the topography that we have. Does
Okay.
that kind of, like probably your roadway, not that you notice it as you're driving so much, because really from, this would probably be about 300 foot. It's maybe going up like 2 foot at the road surface.
2, okay.
5 from this point back in here.
Yeah.
But again, this could be like maybe somebody's been digging things out. I mean, it does show a strong contour line, and then along in here too. But you see how it changes? Like you've got a 670 all the way up here, but then a 670 all the way actually back to here too,
Okay.
because of the way it goes. But for your property, it generally looks like this is a pond you have here.
Yeah.
So it does show like 671. You have a pond right here, so that is it's 670, and then inside the pond it can't get through water, but it does appear like there's a hill here, so this is probably like 671, 72, because this outer one around the pond is your 671, 72, 73, 74. It does show that there's like some like swale contour, but again, is that enough? Like most of the water, it appears, is going to go right into your pond. So look, again, when the cases you bring up, like anything draining from typically like the half of the property or like the half of the house, usually it'll go this way and that way. And so those are the things too, is just, I get your point too, especially with, you know, if we're talking about soil correction.
I see
and
a
then,
little mini pond right there.
Yeah.
Now, that's not even a pond, but it's probably a standing water low area.
yeah, depression in there.
Okay.
Yeah, and it, you know, could there be
Yeah,
something there
so
too?
what
And this is all
I'm
just things
seeing is
that
that
nature
there's
itself
a
does. I mean,
Yeah.
you'll see it on everybody's property.
Right,
It doesn't make
right.
sense, but
What would
yeah, in
be
general,
north
you know, how much of it is,
of
you know, and that gets back to the
Because
theory.
then we got the Maumee River over here. So is any of that draining that way?
Yeah. Well, so the way that the detail works is there's a big, if you go onto there, and I could kind of show you there, we do have a ridge line. So
In my head, I'm thinking how much drains into the ground and saturates, how much
Yeah.
goes into the Maumee River, because that's downhill to my south, and how much really goes into the Swan Creek, considering
Yeah.
it's just a pipe by the road.
So one thing to consider too is when it does with the benefiting land use, if it does
So-
infiltrate into the ground, that
Okay.
gets to be the other thing is, and it's not directly close to you, but that's the hard distinction to make. Okay, your water infiltrates into the sand and comes into the groundwater table or the aquifer, and it's in there. You know, we can't, you know, unless soil borings
Yeah.
were done. But with the farmers and the old drainage tile that's in there, that drainage tile is collecting that groundwater that's been infiltrated from rain,
Yeah.
and then kicks it out into ditches. Now,
Right.
directly adjacent to you, there's no historical farm that I can see. There is, it looks like there's ag land probably about 3/4 of a mile due southeast of your house. That, you know, that's the whole thing. On a grand watershed
Okay.
scale, that's where it's just saying, okay, all this water's coming to a point. Like, have you ever heard of the Continental Divide?
There
Like, there's a place in Indiana, and the theory with
That's
Masco
what,
hydraulics.
everything goes one way, one
Yeah.
side.
That,
Okay.
like, if a rainstorm fell on this one road out in Indiana, if rain falls on the south side, it goes to the Gulf of Mexico. If rain falls on the north side, it goes up to the Great Lakes. That is how Masco hydrology is done, to show that even though you're not seeing the rain sheet flowing to the road, that in some way the way that drainage works at the
Yep.
points is it's getting to an area. So Swan Creek watershed, and I'll pull up the map here in a zoomed out way. Maybe this can help you to see it. I gotta get the petition layer on. I think you want to change up here.
Okay.
Yeah, here we go. So I'll turn this around, and if you need to, are you able to see that?
Yeah.
So there's gonna be a lot of other colors that are in here, and these are just for petitions of like other ditches. But so right here, you see where the blue ends and it just becomes normal aerial? This is the ridge line of what was looking at the topography, where if we zoom in,
That's the divide, the Continental Divide.
this is the divide of Swan Creek. So in theory, everything that falls on the inside of this blue is what is being drained into through farm fields, farm drains, or et cetera. Anything in theory that falls here is going straight to the Maumee.
Is that a high point elevation?
Yeah, so when we go into zoom in here, and then I'll click on the topo,
Give me 1 second.
it's
I'm gonna try to
generally,
see if
and again,
there's
we're so
any-
flat,
okay,
that it's
so
hard
there
in
isn't
making
I
a
get worried it
determination.
doesn't go uphill, so that.
Yeah,
That'd be
but so
clear.
like this 671, it
Well,
appears
yeah.
that when
There's an easement in
the
between
lines were
maybe to the
drawn for
south
this
as well.
watershed map, and we would use
Because
like
there's a
Ohio
42
EPA,
inch line that
USDA,
runs there,
you
so
know, you
if
see
there's
all of
something
this to
there,
where
um,
this high mound,
we would be
679,
able to access
and then
it.
all the
We
water
would,
you can tell is going this way.
we do
Right.
have the right
Well,
to be
you know, in
there,
here,
but
maybe there's like a
if you would like
swale
us
that's kind
there,
of taking
or if
this.
you would like to
There
be
is like a
there
depression there, but
while that
to where
happens,
in theory it's saying like all this, definitely that all this is migrating, you know, this way, because the contour's slanted, and if you just run it in the same
The
direction as
numbers
it's
go
going,
down.
yeah, it's all running there. So when we zoom out and put, because I believe I still have your property, it should be a yellow circle. Where's
Do you
that?
have a fence or
Birchville
anything
White
that would
House.
be an issue?
So you're up here. So you're close to the end of like Fulton being in there, but since Fulton dropped out, you're in here. And so where the watershed goes all the way down to is there. So you're in Swan Township, correct? Or Providence?
I'm Providence
You're
Township.
just on the, okay, so the other side of the street must be Swan
Swan
then?
Township, yeah.
Okay, Yeah, I didn't know how big Providence
Okay,
was,
do you have a good
and I
phone
think
number?
I did see somewhere
Have you
they,
reached it?
you had Providence, I think, on there when I saw Jay's email. But I was surprised, you are like the northern end of it, but, yeah, I mean, even residents in here, so like, somebody that's down here, you know, like
So
this
draining
person.
towards Swan Creek then,
Yeah,
okay.
and they're coming in, and when I, so like, if I go back to your property,
Yeah, let me talk to a couple people.
let me see.
We
and
can go
we right up here, and then we click on, you know, storm sewers, you said you had that one out front. So yeah, you do have one out front.
Yes.
You know, and there, some of it is, now again, these storm sewers, their primary benefit is to get the roadway.
Right.
So, it's taking the
Something like
roadway,
that.
and then in here, let me look at it, so 671 when I zoom in, will it give me that one, or, so this is probably like a high mark.
That's a different one.
672, this is a 671, so that's draining in, 671 through there, so 674, some of this mound is kind of coming this way,
Right, whatever rain to the front is
Yeah.
obviously gonna drain, but
and that's gonna be the surface wall, and then you
That's-
have a pond back here where everything kind of here is
Okay.
kind of coming into this.
right.
Alright,
So,
thank you.
yeah, I mean, again, when it's that claim for it,
Yep.
now, like on, again, the mass scale hydrology is that whether the water's going this way or into the pond, and if that's a groundwater fed pond, there's that exchange of surface water to groundwater, and is that still coming out in under drains or anything? It goes with the assumption of, especially a large petition like this in a watershed, that, again, like the theory of those continental divides, as all the rain falls into this area, it's ultimately collecting into the system. The largest thing is Swan Creek, the main branch of it, and then all of its tributaries of those, and then ultimately comes up, everything's shaded blue. These purples make it confusing. Let me turn this off real quick, because those are all the streets. This is better. So then Swan Creek is all here, coming up into here, and then until it ultimately outlets right here in the city of Toledo.
Oh, okay.
And then all the green is 10 Mile. So the same principle.
And that
You know,
one
they're
already
up
went
here.
through past.
Yeah,
you
that
got
one
past,
passed.
yeah.
But the same theory is, you know, all of these, it goes up to the state line because petitions, at least for the ditch petitions, is an Ohio thing. We can't force Michigan to do it. We tried to talk to them about, you know, joining in on this in their own
Mhm.
facet. They said they'll manage their own stuff their own way. But the same thing here, all of this drainage, as rainfall goes into here in some mechanism, you know, in a light rain, yeah, some of these, now especially up in here though, it's different. You're in a lucky part where it is sand, oak openings. Up here, it's all clay. So
Right.
this stuff is running off a lot of farming communities in the western.
Mhm.
All of this is going throughout here into here. So everybody is just paying their portion of like the runoff through those 5 factors. Now again, it's taking assumptions, putting those into an equation for factoring
Right.
and giving you that. So that's the information that, again, Jay has written in text that, you know, you can go over and read as well. Again, keep this with you.
Yeah,
You can
thank
use
you.
this too.
So,
But it's just the theory and the practice behind it. Is it to sit there and say like, did we go out to everybody's property and do like
I
rainfall
know that's
gauges? and-
impossible, yeah.
So with that assumption, at the end of the day though, are we still talking about, are you in the right range? I mean, obviously with the exception thing and not knowing the dates again, it's stated that there is a fix for the next year, but I know you're concerned about this year with the price point. So again, I
Cause
can
like,
get that.
I sat down at the meeting last year in Swanton, I got my 5 minutes with the engineers guys, I asked questions, they pulled up my parcel, and I asked about exemptions, and I asked about sand versus clay, and they never corrected me on anything. So, I won't take too much more time on this, cause I think you've pretty much given me plenty to see and look at. It's not down to the inch and micromanaged, it's just those graphs this way and that way,
Yeah.
and the continental divides. But the other thing that was kind of, I wanted to see about was, so since my drainage pipe isn't part of this ditch petition work, if it clogs up or any number of people's clogs up, we're not draining,
They're on the other
backing up. Ultimately, that falls back on us to clean our own drainage pipes,
So those
right?
storm sewers that was at the front of your property?
Yeah.
Archibald White House is.
Who
let me
cleans
check.
those?
Whoever owns the roadway is whose responsibility it is. So let me go back to your property and see, Archibald White House is county. So if you have, like, if there's issues with the catch basin, there's one in the right of way at your property, and then there's one that's still in the right of way, but it's in the parcel line of your neighbor.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about that one.
It doesn't matter though.
Yeah.
It's county right away. So if there's any issues with these, And I have a crew that goes out and inspects these, and when they find ones that clean, they go out and clean them. So they were actually out there this morning in Springfield Township. But yeah, for those for maintenance, that's already set. It's us, the county's right of way, so we'll get those cleaned. You just
Okay.
let us know if you notice backing up and then you happen to go there after a rain event and there's sediment, leaves and stuff, our crews will go out and clean those up.
Okay.
Our responsibility to make sure they're working.
Was Swan Creek dug, or was that a natural thing?
Swan Creek was natural, 10 miles natural, but
Okay.
you'll see a lot of the tributaries that come into it is going to be, a lot of them are man-made, agricultural ditches. So when they came through to make all of this tillable farm field, they had to dig out these. So anytime you see a ditch in the aerial maps that is a linear, like it's from here to here, it's most likely in a farm field, or if it's not, it was from a farm field that's now subdivisions or something.
Is that yours?
Typical natural waterways are gonna have a sinuosity, so they're gonna kinda wanna do this
They're
number.
gonna flow the high and lows.
Yeah, exactly. So then as it's coming around the bend, the fastest water is gonna hit this bank, slow down. And so when you have this straight line over time, and especially depending on the soil type, it's always just smashing into the walls, and you'll slowly start to get to where it's like this, and it'll create its own wave action.
So it's my understanding that a ditch created after whatever the year date came with, it had to have a maintenance plan done with it already. Had to have some sort of, it's in those codes.
Yeah.
And that the reason this is on the table is because this didn't have one because it was before that. I don't know if I'm talking on my ass or if that sounds vaguely familiar.
No, there is. There's been changes of the petition codes over time.
Yeah.
There is. I think it's like 1957 or something, that anything after that, the code
That
changed in
sounds
such
right.
a way. Yeah, I do know there's something in there about it, because before then it was a lack, I think, of record keeping, of knowing the ditches and this and that. But with that petition change, it changed something in there in regards to, I'm not exactly sure either, but the way that Ohio law works is that if there is a public water course, which is established either through a drainage improvement petition, and then after 6 years it's viewed as a waterway, or 21 years is like the survey legal thing, that if it's a waterway that collects drainage from multiple benefiting landowners, it's viewed as a public water course. They're gonna be considered water courses. So like your Army Corps of Engineers are gonna view them as a waterway. A waterway is a wetland. Wetlands get associated next to those. You also get FEMA, so the ditches go out there by FEMA to determine floodplain. I don't think you have any floodplain down there as association, but Jerusalem Township, they'll
So,
have that. So
how many
FEMA
you
and
got
Army
now?
Corps are the two federal agencies
Okay.
that really have their regulations set up into all of this stuff. So there may have been changes in relation to that due to the federal things, but the responsibility of cleaning and maintaining a ditch, unless it's petition, has always been on private property owners. So
Right.
like if you had a ditch on your
I can do that,
property,
Jason.
and a lot of people don't know this, but it's their responsibility to clean it. Now, previous practices, whether it was in this office or others, and some townships still like to do it, they'll go out there and do, maintenance projects, cleaning the ditches up and stuff. But where there gets to be a gray area is when, and instances throughout Ohio have been like, they go out on a one person's property and clean only that person's. Okay, well, that person's the only person experiencing benefit, but it's public monies in a general fund. And that's where some of them were getting into trouble with the state auditor's office. Whereas a petition, it's a communal benefit. Everybody pays as a benefiting landowner to do work, and in this larger thing, over time, get to all the areas and start cleaning it up.
Okay.
We have smaller ditches that do that, but a petition enables it to where the private property owner can choose to do work if they have the ditch themselves and then get a credit reduction each year, or they just pay into the assessment. But they also have the county as a benefit to say, hey, I'm having issues on my property of the ditch that's under petition. I need your assistance. And then that brings us into it. So it helps. The biggest thing that it helps with private property landowners is when there's disputes between residents. So like I have an issue in a township, not yours, but more northern to yours, and there is a ditch that's under petition. Well, there's an enclosure portion of it to where a lot of the problems seem to be coming from this pipe or enclosure. So it means it's an open ditch, and then it comes into a pipe, a 30-inch pipe, goes all the way to where it comes back out of the pipe, and then it's open ditch. So we have open ditch, closed ditch, open ditch. Well, a lot of the problems are coming from that closed ditch that's on people's private property. But since it's under petition, we're able to go in there legally through the easement that comes with the petition to be able to get work, because everybody on the upstream side of that pipe is experiencing flooding into their outbuildings and stuff like that. So without the petition, it was basically the only recourse they had was
Just
to
hit the landowner.
was to sue their neighbor in
Yeah.
a civil litigation. But under the petition, they now have said, hey, we have an issue, we have a thing, so we just went out there and conducted a maintenance project, cleaned out the open ditch, which had a lot of concerns. I mean, there were portions of it that my crew was pulling out upwards of almost 2 feet of sediment. We still have that pipe to do, but we're gonna go back out there and clean that pipe. We ran a camera in, there was a bunch of random stuff in there, so we've gotta
I'm
get some
sure
equipment
logs,
and
tires, sand.
yeah, luckily no tires, a lot of sand, and then even some bricks. I don't know how the bricks got in there, but we're gonna clean that out. Now, one property owner has stated, and this is kind of why it got put under petition by the township and a resident, was the landowner who first owns that first piece of the pipe doesn't want anybody on his property at all. So nothing was allowed. The people didn't have the funds or the means to be able to sue this person. The petition allowed it to be where the county can come and support to make sure drainage is working correctly.
Yeah.
The landowner still does not want anybody on there, but we have to work through the
Legally now,
legal.
yeah.
We can, you know, this is where I've got to meet with the prosecutors and go over talking about things, because I want them to understand that it's under petition. We do have this right, but I don't want it to be an egregious conflict. Like, we're not going on here for the land taking or anything. It's, I need this pipe to allow this water to get through so that the properties
Upstream
of me,
flood.
yes,
I get that.
they don't experience their issues. So
That's a shame that happens.
yeah, and it does, and it's not to say I don't think in your area, there's some areas around the county though that, you know, there really gets to be, you know, that instance of it. I know, like, you're kind of near White House, Lone Oak has its own petition, and there's a project that has been put in my lane to where we may go out and be dipping that soon too. So, you know, it's all throughout the county, some areas more than others, and then, you know, working with the landowners. This petition would enable, though, that if there is a problem on a ditch, that we have that ability to go in and fix it so that nobody floods out. Because without the petition, it literally would be having to go through the courts.
Every single time.
One landowner has to sue another, and then what is called the reasonable use doctrine is what governs it. So the complainant, the person who is flooding out and experiencing these things, has to be able to hire legal representation that knows the reasonable use doctrine to state that the flooding that has been caused by their downstream neighbor that is causing this flooding is unreasonable. So you get into this whole what's reasonable versus unreasonable that the judge has to determine, and then if it is viewed as unreasonable, what is the dollar amount of damages or course to correct,
Gotcha.
and all that is determined by the judge in those. So
Is the Lone Oak thing, is that part of the Swan Creek, or is that?
Lone
separate?
Oak is separate. Lone Oak is already under petition, but what the intent is, so like 10 Mile up here
Yeah.
did pass. So any of the smaller ditch petitions that we do have that is not joint, meaning it's not with Fulton County, we can aggregate or merge into 10 Mile. And then so we would just say, okay, this becomes a workable ditch, and then we put it under the spectrum, and we just move that maintenance base of Ford Ditch is one that recently was petitioned, I think 2 years ago. So we would just take Ford Ditch's maintenance base, bring that into 10 miles, and then just transfer over the values all to make sure that, you know, we're basically moving monies so that, okay, here's a new maintenance base. Do people's rates change now that we include this or not? Because those people that are in where it gets more confusing to not merge them is we now have, you know, the large 10 Mile, but then Ford Ditch is a little piece of it. So in theory, these people could have their little portion of Ford to pay, their portion of 10 Mile. Usually 10 miles will be less because it's just like a piece of a pizza pie. So like if you're in a smaller watershed, there's not many landowners, but the same amount of cost per year, you're gonna pay more per year. Whereas 10 Mile, it's spread over 70,000 parcels that pay into it. So Ford Ditch, I believe, has like 180 landowners. That's gonna be a larger percentage of, say, $30,000 of work for the year versus $30,000 of work where it's spread out over 70,000 people.
Right.
So it gets to be that. So that's why we would merge that into there and just have like a general 10 Mile thing. because Ford goes into 10 Mile. After it runs for about 1.1 miles, it dips into 10 Mile Creek right there below Sylvania Metamora. And then so we would merge those all in. But we can't merge anything unless there are two existing petitions and they're like for like in the same watershed.
Okay.
So yeah, like Lone Oak would eventually, if Swan passes, would merge into Swan Creek.
And this all started with White House Village.
Correct. Village of
Okay.
White House was the petitioner for Swan Creek, and
Okay.
then Spencer Township, I believe, was the petitioner for 10 Mile.
Okay.
They have a lot of issues.
Spencer
there.
does flood, yeah, that's the wetland.
But yeah, so they are always calling Kyle and myself about a lot of the issues, and a lot of it, unfortunately, is some of the state and Metro Parks lands, and they like to keep that. But that's another mechanism too. You know, these Metro Parks. You know, it's great to keep things nature.
I got beef with them, yeah.
I know. I figured you were in the area because you're upstream of where it goes through, like the oak openings. So, but that's the thing about it too is those ditches that run through there that are included in the petition. I'm going to be scheduling a meeting with them for 10 Mile, and then if Swan passes, the same thing. You know, the work they want to do the work on their property. Well, that's fine, but it needs to be done the way that we need it to be done for a proper ditch. And that means removing fallen trees, dipping out sediment. You know, it's not just their current practice as what I've been told, and when we've had meetings, is they let nature be nature. But what that means is...
But they just took down all those trees, and they just made a whole lot of runoff, and they just,
Yeah.
they're having a trouble making nature, because I'm all
Yeah.
about conservation.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there's a line between conservation and public safety and health, right?
Landscaping,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
So that is the thing. But no, that was a concern that a lot of people had too. Is are the Metro Parks going to get assessed? Yeah, I believe for 10 and Swan Mile, those two combined with the parcels they have running through it, their assessments, I think they're at like $250,000. So they either pay their assessment or they do the work in their parks to clean it up. Whether they do the work themselves or they just pay, we would then hire contractors to go in there and clean those ditches out.
But I heard that was like gonna be like the second year or something, they weren't gonna jump on the Metro Parks right away, does that sound right?
Well, they sent in, the person that I've been dealing with at Metro Parks sent me in their maintenance assessment reduction, which is stating, hey, we want to do work on our own to reduce our assessment costs. They sent it in, and that's the meeting that I'm going to schedule is, okay, what work are you looking to do? Where is it at? On what ditches? So when they sent that in, that to me is telling me that they intend to do work. Now, whether they do that and, you know, it's agreed upon by, you know, okay, this work is 30%
Yeah, how long do you
reduction.
give them to do the work?
So for their same thing, it's going to be the same as what residents are. Since they're not a political subdivision, they're like a quasi-government, but theirs would be the same thing. So for filing the maintenance assessment reductions, they had to get it in by May 1st. They sent it to me like the last week of April, and now it's going through the discussions about what are you doing. You know, I'm still doing meetings with some of the farmers in 10 Mile too, because some of the farmers are doing their own work. One guy I got to go out and inspect. He just finished cutting and mulching down some of his ditch line, but the same thing for them. You know, by what they've sent in as an intent to do this with the application, that they're going to be doing it rather soon, because I need to know definitively by the last 2 weeks of October, did this work get done and what percentage to reduce them by.
Okay.
So that by November 1st is when the final assessment rolls get put into the auditor's office onto everybody's land taxes for 26. That's what the auditor's office has told me. Basically, November they start to compute all of the special assessments and put it onto people's parcels to start going out January 1st.
Okay.
So that's why I told them my hardline cutoff date is the final 2 weeks of October to know if work got done. Same with some of the farmers too, because
And that's just
they're going to be harvesting.
That's just a partial reimbursement, right? Or do they get?
It'd be a partial reduction. So
Reduction.
they can go from 0 to 100%. Now, if
So
they've
it is
got,
possible to get 100% back?
if you're
for
on,
these
if you
guys?
have a ditch, yeah.
Yeah.
If
Okay.
you have a ditch on your property, the code allows for those type of like a residential cleaning or the scope of what we're looking for in an office, 0 to 100%, depending on the type of work that they're proposing.
Okay.
And generally, if you know, like the one farmer, his assessment for the year was $350. And so he basically went out there, put himself as an operator. He had a big brush mower, and so he went and did it. He said it took him 4 hours. You know, so when you incorporate that to today's cost
Labor
of
costs.
if you hired a contractor, he was somewhere in the ballpark of about $400. So if he did the work, he did enough work for that year's assessment, which would be 100% reduction. He went over it, so he kind of just eats that, but he gets the work done himself the way he wants it. And so if I
But
go
next
out
year there
there,
won't be any work probably for him to do, so he can't.
there could be like a minor mowing,
Yeah.
or maybe it's like a tree fell over. There could always be that opportunity, and that's where we're willing to like work with people. Like, is there tangible work to be done? Because if somebody does have that applicable ditch to be able to do the work, you know, the most feasible option is for each person to do it themselves, and it's allowable by code. So depending on the work, now, you know, if somebody were to, you know, send in an assessment reduction application and say, you know, say their assessment is $1,000. Oh, well, I went out and I cut my grass along it, and it, you know, it's a little strip of ditch and it cost me $5,000. Well, is that reasonable? You know, that's why the worksheet that I created is like a step-by-step, like the notification by May 1st. Then I meet with them out in the field to go over, okay, what is your situation? You know, is it apples to apples, oranges to oranges when we're talking about the work that you're proposing to do, your assessment, you know, where does that all fall into there?
Okay.
So that it's not like basically preventing a blank check type thing. Somebody says, hey, I did this, you know, my assessment was $5,000 and I cut my grass. Well, I mean, was it really only like $200 you spent? Because I can't give you 100%. I'll give you some percentage, maybe 10% or something, but, you know, it's just making sure that it's fair and equitable for the assessment.
And being that I have nothing to file a credit for,
Yeah.
because it's not the ditch, there's no like, hey, just volunteer for 6 hours helping remove log jams or anything like that.
The way it stands right now is because you don't have that, but could there be something to where, again, something with the stormwater utility to where if people did, I mean, and that gets into, and ultimately it takes Mike Panuski's direction as a county engineer. Could he provide incentives that those in the watershed that do not have a mechanism to do this on their property, but maybe help out in some other form or fashion and have a reduction in the stormwater utility, because you get the stormwater utility fee. Could that be a possibility? I mean, it could. I know he's brought up some things for like the schools, because the schools.
I'll be honest, it was just until a few months ago that I realized I couldn't even file for a credit or anything, because I don't even have a ditch. I just always looked at my drainage pipe and thought it was a ditch, and I don't
Yeah.
know how many other people were confused about that.
No, there were a lot. When I went to the meetings, that was a big thing too, is a lot of people were not happy to hear that if they don't have a by name listed ditch, that they don't even have that option to do it.
Yeah.
The way that the code works is it says that people choosing to do work on a petition ditch themselves can get a reduction. I mean, that's gonna take something down in Columbus,
Yeah.
to where if it could make it, at least in the code, directly state that others have a mechanism for reduction. But as it stands now, landowners on the petition ditch can work it off. If you don't, you're kind of just,
Stuck paying it.
yeah.
Okay. Alright. I wanna take all your day.
No, it's okay.
So to kind of jump to a different subject kind of that I have, I don't understand how the engineer's office has like the sanitary, the different departments, because I know that like with the mosquitoes in our area, we have mosquito abatement and that their job is to reduce standing water, and how, do they have overlap, and is it the same, are you guys the same people doing that?
So no, it's,
I mean, if there's log jams creating standing water for mosquitoes, shouldn't they have already been on that?
you know,
Where does that
that's,
divide come in?
yeah.
It feels like double dipping, I'm just gonna be honest.
No, I understand. So in relation to the different departments that are under the county, so our office, because Mike Panuski's county engineer, he is an elected official, just
Mhm.
like every other
Yep.
county engineer. So he's an elected official, and this office works directly for him. Now he works as like the representative to the commissioners. So he's the commissioner's engineer, but we don't work directly for the commissioners. We work under the county, but we work for Mike P. So there's a difference, and it may not be the exact same way in every county, but at least in Lucas County. So like there's Mike Panuski, who's the engineer, and he will be the engineer for the commissioners when they tap him to say, hey, engineer thing. Now, like the sanitary engineer's office, building regulations, Toledo area sanitary district, who does the mosquitoes, they all work directly for the commissioners in that respect. So like everything going through SanEng between sanitary pipes and water lines is all through the county commissioners. TASD, they're what's known as like a quasi-government, so they're still government, they're a part of the commissioners, but they have their own unique makeup of their department and what they do. So mosquito abatement, and their big thing is during the warm months, they're out there spraying.
Right.
Now in the wintertime, they do come to us and in the past have said like, hey, we can go around to the ditches, and sometimes they let us know and sometimes they don't, but they would just go out to a ditch and start dipping it. Well, previous times that they've done this, they're again, when I went back to like the federal permits and stuff, to go out and dip a ditch, if you do it within the means of what that ditch historical grade and all that stuff is, you're perfectly fine. But the minute you go too far, dipping too deep, or you start to take away the bank where the ordinary high water mark is, you've now got into
Creating pond where it should be draining.
well, yeah, the potential not only for that, but you've gotten into an area where you need a federal permit.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you dip a ditch below historical grade, you're now needing an Army Corps permit, a 404 is what they say. Or the same thing, if you change the banks below the ordinary high water mark where water can ebb and flow, you need an Army Corps permit.
You guys aren't doing that though with this ditch petition, right?
So in the beginning, the 6-year plan, we're basically, because there's so much maintenance work that needs to be done, the first 6 years is really about logjam removal and then sediment dipping. With those two, we shouldn't, because sediment dipping, when we say that, it really means we're gonna dip out the sediment load that has came in, but for every ditch that we have historical plans on from like the 1930s and 40s, we're gonna go down to that elevation and stop. But if we didn't have that information, or if we didn't use it in the field and we accidentally went too low, we would be against federal regulation and we could get dinged hardcore. So like when we do the 2-stage projects, sometimes, in most cases, we'll end up getting like a nationwide permit because we are gonna be getting into that ordinary high water mark. So we do on these H2 Ohio projects, and that's why it takes a lot of effort to get these into there, because you've gotta kind of start to dip into that stuff and get federal or state permits. We do that all on the front end because it's required by the grant, through the design of the, changing out the slope of it to create a bench and then come back up to existing. So
Is that the long-term plan for this after your 6 years of maintenance and just cleaning log
throughout the
jams?
whole 6 months, we still will. So in the chute for
Will you be
like
doing
Swan
2-stage
Creek.
ditch projects along
Yeah,
the Swan Creek
and the nice
stuff?
thing with that is, so yeah, for Swan Creek, just south of 20A, there's what's called, it's the intersection of Albin and 20A,
Yeah.
where there's like a lot of the stockpiles and the subdivisions getting built out.
Yeah.
Well, just to the southwest of that intersection is called Natch Trap Ditch, and that is actually a project that we'll be doing. It'll be starting at the end of this year or the beginning of 2026, and that is included in Swan Creeks. And the nice thing with that is it's H2 Ohio funds, so it's grant funds. So we're able to clean out that ditch and use the grant funding and not have to dip into the petition assessment monies. So all the assessment monies that we have will be used on the other areas where we can't do grant funding, but we're still able to clean out, I believe, between Natch Trap Ditch and its 2 tributaries of Wicks and Taylor, it'll be about 2 miles of ditches that we'll be able to not only clean out, but then put in a 2-stage bench, which greatly increases the volume of water that can be held, so reducing flooding events.
Okay. What determines what can be covered by a grant, what can't? The H2 Ohio thing, like, I'm just being straight with you. Back in July of last year, I went to that meeting with just one question on the forefront of my mind was, why are we getting hit with 100% of this bill without going and looking for grant money? And I'm thinking, surely between, the mosquitoes, floodplains, and conservation, whatever, there's got to be something out there. And then after that meeting concluded, and I got the clip from the news, Lee Conklin, and I heard Mike say it himself, that they were going to look for grant money. And then every time I've called and asked on Facebook, they said we can't get the grant money until the petition passes, which is kind of like you can't read the bill until you pass the bill type thing in my mind. So,
Yeah.
and then a couple of weeks ago, what was it, Sebecki and Pazuski, we got $7 million from Ohio for a grant. Does any of that go toward, I know
for
it's
the-
not gonna touch 350 million or whatever, but why, where does the grants come in? Because it just seems like an awful lot to hit us with.
Yeah, so
100%.
I know that he went down. I didn't know, I don't know if that's been finalized or not. I know he was going down for a sum of money throughout all of Ohio to be able
That
to
was
log
the
jams.
second thing, yeah.
Okay, so that's
Lucas
where
County
he's.
got 7 million, but I don't know.
Oh,
does
okay,
that
so
all
that
go to
did come
Toledo
through?
then?
Well, so Lucas County, that would be
That
the
much
thing is,
did, yeah.
if 7 million, I know that he was talking about, I forget even what the total amount was, some amount of money for all of Ohio. If it's 7 million, what would happen with that is it would go to Lucas County, and then
Yes,
that.
7 million was coming to Lucas, and I think the whole all of Ohio thing was still in the works.
Okay,
So if I could recall, it was separate, but
so if Lucas County got 7 million, that's what would end up happening. Like that 7 million would go to the commissioners, and then at that part,
the commissioners decided.
they would disperse it out as need be. Now, what they could do, and I'm sure that they would want to do again with these petitions, is, you know, you basically say, hey, split it up 3.5 million each, and then put it directly towards work in this watershed. To where could we have a reduction of monies for a couple of years to offset this? I mean, it's definitely a potential, and that would, I didn't directly hear this from Panuski, but that could have been his avenue where he said about pursuing the grants to be able to do this and to reduce the cost. But I know on at least the H2 Ohio grant funds, the problem with that is the way that the wording is in the grants. Those grants are for improvements, and whereas this petition is a maintenance. So while we've tried to do these and we can do them consecutively, the grants are specifically for improvements of it, and there's a distinction between an improvement going and taking a ditch and then turning it into a 2-stage with the bench and coming up versus maintenance where you're coming in and touching it. Because the problem with that is working with landowners. Every time we do those 2-stage ditches, there's a lot of proactive work where we have to get the okay from the landowners to say, hey, can we do this on your property? So a lot of times it's getting to the farmers because it'll be maybe 1 or 2 farmers in the area, and they're open for losing that bit of longitudinal so that they can have a clean ditch, but they'll lose that land to be able to plant crops and stuff. So a lot of that, it comes into working with landowners, and then it has to be viewed as an improvement versus it can't be maintenance for the H2 Ohio grants.
yeah. Because ultimately, I'm not against improvement of the area and communal waterway maintenance and stuff like that. And you guys are just doing what White House has asked of you with the petition and stuff like that. So it's not like I'm targeting you guys or anything. But like, if there's log jams in an area, then call that an improvement. Get your grant money, remove the log jams rather than hitting up the entire Swan Creek. I would rather see something like that, and that's where a lot of I don't know, I'm just trying to find other options where we're not nickel and diming ourselves out of our homes because of property taxes.
Yeah. Well, just like the gentleman before said too, that requested a meeting with Panuski is that exact fact. This just unfortunately comes at the same exact time where everybody in Lucas County just went through the Aries thing. Yeah. And he said that was his biggest thing. Once he did submit an exception and it got approved, he still wants to talk further, and I said, that's fine. But his biggest thing is the Aries thing, and how that came in, and some people's I think got reduced or corrected, others
There's
stayed
just been
the
so
same.
many errors, and as
Yeah.
people trying to survive and work, it's hard to keep on top of everything and I just, like I said, I've stared at this for a year, and it was just a couple months ago I realized that it was clay, and I've talked to you guys, and I just didn't know what questions to ask.
No,
and
yeah,
now
I
it's
totally
too
get you,
late
yeah.
to go through the.
Well, I mean, like I said
Form
again,
ahead,
I'll put
but
your name
I'd
down
love
in there
to,
for it. And again, that's why I've given you all this stuff to be able to for you to look over
And I
then to come
appreciate
with
that,
questions and all
yeah.
these things. So yeah, like I said, you've got. I mean, this blue highlight is your property, topography of the contour lines. You've got the exact spreadsheet that Kyle printed out. Quick run through of the those determinations of it, and then again, all of this is where's the front page right here. Jay's email of the responses. He said he was working on the final bit,
Yeah.
but he didn't get through to I
I
think
see
these
why it
last
took him
ones.
so long now.
Yeah, he was going through. But yeah, if there's anything else, I mean, again, all this is yours to keep. Here's the 2 calculations with the topo. And yeah, I'll definitely I'll get you scheduled along with the 4 other people to be able to come in and talk, and and again, he does provide in there that, like,
if you've got to go to work over the road, let me know, because
No,
I
no,
can
it's-
wrap this up too, because I got a few more questions since I got your time.
oh, okay.
So I want to say it was the quick fact sheet. I can't be 100% certain, but my concern as well, if this passes, is that it's in perpetuity, that this goes on forever, and there's no cap that I can see. So while it does state that we should expect it to go down, I called and talked to somebody in this office, and they said, well, with inflation, it could possibly go up over time too. And somewhere, I want to say it was your quick facts, it said something about max 20% of the maintenance space.
Yep, so what that is in
And-
the code there, 20%, I'm definitely familiar with this one,
Okay.
because, so what that 20% means is, this is in the code, and it's for resident and citizen protection. So that 20% in there is to make sure that a ditch petition is not viewed as just like a fund collector. So at the end of each fiscal year, there cannot be more than 20% of the total maintenance base in the fund and continue to receive things.
Okay.
So like each year, there has to be 19% or less of that maintenance base in the fund, unless there's a dedicated amount. But, you know, temporarily it can go above 20%, but that's taking the money in to be able to spend it on projects. This can't be like, without this cap, it could be that, oh, we're gonna collect,
Sit on 100% and grow the interest, and yeah.
yeah, however that works, and that's the Office of Management and Budget
Okay.
downtown, and I don't know
It
all
was
that.
just
But it,
being that it said MB here and MB here, and I've got a maintenance base.
so
and it was
think of
just
that,
kinda-
that is for the entire watershed.
Okay.
So 20% means, so, you know, just real quick, saying it's, say 20% of the 275 million is gonna be like, you know, 60 million. There can't be more than 60 million once we get done all the projects before we assess for the next time. So that it's not this big fund that just collects all this money and then
That's reasonable.
it just sits on it. So that is in there, and it's a good thing too. It makes sure that it's just
Some sort
not
of
this
checks
thing of
and
collecting it
balances.
and that you guys, you know, the residents are getting assessed, but you see no work. This ensures that if money's collected, work is getting done.
Okay. But there is no guarantee that it's gonna go down necessarily.
I'm a realist.
Theoretically, it should, but I
Yes,
mean, if
theoretically,
mine goes
I'm
out
a
and
realist.
somebody
You know,
else
that's
comes in
it.
and-
Really just depends. You know,
Yeah.
if we're sending bids out to contract, you know, really from today's date to back in 2018, the monies that we're able to get work done has lost its value. So whereas a like for like project going now versus back in 2018, which is only, you know, what, 8 years ago, 7 years ago, is the fact that it costs us now anywhere between 10 to 20% more. So that's why, just being real, I don't want to sit here and like, if money's never changed and inflation wasn't a thing, yes, that money will be going down. But with inflation, you know, if at the end of the 6-year project, we're back in the same boat where, you know, a construction project for removing log jams is 20% more. Well, if we maintain doing the same amount of work in year 6 as year 1, then yeah, you're going to see a slight increase of it. But as the amount of work needing to get done wanes down and it's less severe issues, yeah, in theory, there should be less monies needing to be collected because we've done the major work in the first 6 years, and now we're just kind of doing spot treatment of areas.
Which theoretically is how it should go. It makes
Yeah.
sense. I just
Managed
there was-
well and done efficiently and effectively with bid contracts.
If it's not in writing, though,
Yes.
sometimes it has a
Yeah.
chance to go sideways, depending on who's running the show. To commissioners, is this the one where the people that lived in the district were replaced by other?
No, that was 10 Mile.
Okay,
10 Mile had to have,
so the Lucas
um,
County commissioners on their website are the ones that are going to be in
Correct.
the meeting in July voting.
yeah,
for-
Commissioner
okay.
Sabecki,
Yeah.
Lopez,
I can-
and
Lopez is still on it. 'Cause, okay.
Lopez, Sabecki, and Gherkin.
Gherkin?
Yep.
Okay.
All 3 of them will be
It's just them three.
just those 3.
okay.
Yeah, it's a 3 commissioners vote. 2 is majority, And yeah, unless one of them
Wow,
is
it's all
absent.
decided by 3 people.
Yeah.
All right. What's
But
their
at
favorite cookies?
At the, yeah, at the final hearing, is the thing too, is, and again, that's where everybody has the opportunity to come there and speak,
Yeah, I
on those
heard
things.
some people that they're be showing up on that. What is
Yeah.
the timestamp do they put on that? And I heard if there's people that are legal representatives, do they get the same 3 minutes that everybody else gets, or how does that work? Any
So
idea?
at least from what I can speak on that I know.
Because this is the
um,
commissioner's deal, not yours. I get
Yeah,
that.
is that it would be, and they'll do those time limits because, like at the 10-mile one, there was a lot of people who signed up, and then they were making sure that everybody had the time, and it could continue, so they could say, hey, okay, it's 5 p.m. We've been going at this since 2 p.m. There's still 20 more people to go through. We're gonna put this in continuance to next Thursday. So at the final hearing, there is 3 dates: the preliminary one, July 15th, and then there's 2 consecutive ones the following Tuesdays.
Tuesdays.
So July 15th, the 22nd, and then the 29th. Those latter 2 are if needed.
If reserved, kind of.
Yes.
Okay.
So
And
that if there's so many people to speak, to give everybody the opportunity to speak, those are already
do we just
soft
show up
line.
and sign our name on a
Yeah, so
thing?
what it would be is you go up there to
Is there
One
a formal
Government Center.
process? Okay.
There will be like a sign-in sheet as you come in. I believe as soon as you go in there to the right, there will be like a sign-in sheet. You sign in, you sit down, and then they'll run through that list just like how everybody signed in. Okay, Miss Smith, would you like to get up and speak? And whether you're the first or you see how other people do it.
If you get there
you come up
early, you're
there.
probably going to be on the first day. If you get there late, you're probably going to be on the
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, definitely.
All
So
right.
earlier would be the better, especially if you want to definitely get up there the first day and speak, and then you just go up there, you say your name, your address where you live, and then whatever you would like to talk about pertaining to it. And the people who could speak are the benefiting landowners. So like somebody in Wood County can't go there and speak because
Right.
this doesn't pertain to them.
Gotcha.
But if you're a benefiting landowner, you receive the legal notice such as you have, you do have the right to speak there.
Okay, all right. I think that's about it. Because I gotta process all this and stuff. So
No, I know.
I do appreciate it. Oh, so if I get whatever my chances are to sit down and correct the land, when you're gonna contact me, Mike's gonna contact what?
Yeah, what I would do is-
what do I follow up by without bugging you guys and harassing you?
Well, definitely by all means, bother Jay.
Bother Jay, okay.
Yeah, but no, what it'll be is I've got
It's like
you
I
and the
burned
4
out.
other people.
I
Yeah.
feel bad about it.
No, it's good.
He told me Thursday,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
I didn't hear from him Friday.
But
So.
between that is finding out like a date and a time frame. So like, it's been even for us to have meetings with Mike because he's been going down to Columbus a lot for that logjam thing, other things, the political side of stuff that he has to do. But if I can find a date that he's here in the office, and then the same thing, allocate like 15 minutes to each person, 15 to 30 minutes for each of you. And if I can have that block, once we lock in that date time, then I can send out, those things, whether it's, it would probably be like a letter, but what we could also do too is like email, sending it through email too, because I know for me, I'd much rather prefer an email than.
Because initially my neighbor was on board to come down Wednesday when the first meeting was scheduled, so we could kill 2 birds with one stone. She's delisted too.
Yeah, I
so-
believe that Jay had mentioned that,
He's
you
got
and your
it,
neighbor.
okay.
So, yeah, I mean, by all means, what I would do is I'll put a note in there for you that you and your neighbor, because again, if you both have the same exact issue and are in the same exact boat,
Yeah.
for Mike Panuski to be able to speak to both of you at the same time, I don't feel is beyond the measure of means. So.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. 'Cause if I'm gonna pay it, I'd like to at least pay the right amount.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah. No problem.
I think I took up hours.